like a hoarder. I got boxing busting out the attic.
What's good, everybody? What's good? It's your boy, Cardinal Bud Crawford, or E.S. Red, if that's what you won't call me. And we are back for another one. Alright, y'all, new topic. Is Errol Spence Jr. a more complete fighter than Terence Bud Crawford? Alright, y'all, this is a interesting question, complicated question. Who is the more complete boxer out of these two fighters? Who has the more all-around skill sets? Who has a bigger bag full of tricks out of these two fighters? And you know, it's complicated when you try to compare two athletes, especially two athletes who are doing the same thing. Like, you know, it would be hard to compare a shooting guard and a center, you know, because they do two totally different things. But when you have two welterweight boxers, they're both in the same division, it's kind of hard to say, okay, well, this guy does this better than that guy. They're doing basically the same stuff, but they're doing it in their own way. So for me, I feel like, you know, what are the attributes you like as a boxing fan or as a boxing analyst? I think that's the better way of going about breaking down two fighters. You know, it's more based off what you like. Now, you know, certain skill sets can win you a fight quicker than other skill sets, but when you're breaking down a fight, you're always 9 times out of 10 going to go with what you like as a boxing fan. It's not going to always be just the skill sets that win fights. So when you break down these two fighters, who has the better skills, who is the more complete fighter?
Errol Spence is a fighter that you would want to root for.
I think it starts with the jab. You know, who has the better jab? Who works off their jab better? Who can put combinations together off their jab better? Who can use the jab to control the pace of the fight? Errol Spence, personally, I think, has one of the better jabs in the business. I think his whole game plan is to work off the jab. I think everything he does in the ring is centered around his jab work. And I think that's what's basically going to win him this fight. Now, Terence Crawford has a good jab too, but Terence Crawford is more of a speed style fighter, even though his speed is not the highest level of speed I've ever seen in welterweight boxing before. He uses speed in a different way, and he uses his jab in a different way than Errol Spence does.
As a boxing fan, what do we crave for from our fighters? We want them to fight the best.
But if you had to compare those two guys' jabs, you would definitely have to say that Errol Spence works off his jab a lot more. And I think Errol Spence works his body work off the jab a lot more than Terence Crawford does. Because Terence Crawford, I don't think, is an extremely good body puncher. I think Terence Crawford is an accumulative puncher who, and what I mean by that is that he tries to gas you out or injure you or break you down by using cumulative punches. Like throwing a lot of punches is how he throwing a lot of punches from different directions and with speed, and that's how he tries to break down his opponent. I think Errol Spence is different. He uses the jab to create distance, and then he gets you in a certain position, and then he starts working on your body. So the jab is kind of like a filler. It's to measure you, to gauge your distance and timing. He computes that with his boxing brain. He gets you in a certain position, and then he throws combinations to the body to break you down, slow you down, injure you. And it's crazy that, you know, what has actually been rearing his head for Errol Spence is the fact that he's injuring people's faces more than he's injuring their body. Like, I haven't really recently heard of him stopping somebody with a body shot or breaking somebody's ribs, but he did destroy Kell Brooks' eye socket. He did break Jordanius you guys' eye socket. So it's almost it's a little weird that he's actually able to break facial bones and not ribs, or you know, that he's not damaging people internally with the body shots that he's throwing. I think that's kind of weird because he throws hard body shots and he throws a lot more body punches, I think, than he does head punches. You know, me personally, that's how I view Errol Spence Jr.
Errol Spence gives you action-packed fights.
So, I mean, is that the only intangible that you can place your hand on, is the jab when it comes to these two fighters? No, I think footwork as well. I think both of these guys have impeccable footwork. I just don't think that they both have, you know, look, I compare most fighters to Pacquiao. When I'm comparing an attribute of a fighter, I go back to who I think is the pinnacle of boxers, and that's Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao had some of the best footwork in the business. Now, in the Ugas fight, his footwork lacked. It fell off. It wasn't the same as it normally is. And he lost the fight based off of that footwork, if you ask me. Now, you know, these two guys, Spence and Crawford, they both have good footwork, but they use it differently. Errol Spence has what I like to call dead man's footwork, because he moves around like a mummy. You know, sometimes he can be very mummy-ish. It's very slow pace. It's very calculated. He's going into specific positions to break you down with body shots, you know. And he moves that way, I think, because he works so much off of the jab that he has to move that way. He, you know, to pace himself, he throws a jab, then he moves with the dead man mummy movement. And I think that that's, you know, it's just to pace himself. It's to make sure he throws that jab out there, and it's to gauge his opponent, timing and speed of the opponent.
But yet he's basic. But yet he's a horrible fighter. But he breaking people's bones in their face.
Terence Crawford's much different. He's all over the ring. He's a speedy fighter, got good footwork, but his footwork is more to set up his speed, his fast hand combinations. It's to get him from one position to the next position. Like Errol Spence is more of a mummy movement. Terence Crawford is quick movement. He's hurry. It's very herky-jerky. It's unpredictable. You know, it's not as good as Pacquiao, but it's the same concept that Pacquiao was using. It's the unpredictability of footwork. You know, I wish he would. I think what would help him is to increase the speed of his footwork and hand speed, and working them in tandem. Because I think if Errol Spence is using that methodical slow pace, speeding that methodical slow pace up is how you would beat him.
Everybody say Errol Spence is basic, right? Until they get in there with this dude.
It would bode very well for Terence Crawford if he worked that into his game plan. Now, will he? You know, I don't know. You know, Terence Crawford, he's not a power puncher. He's not the best speed guy out there. He does switch. He has good power in both hands, not over-the-top power, not Errol Spence power, not Manny Pacquiao power. Everything that Terence Crawford does, he does it very well. I don't think he does anything great. You know, I don't think there's one attribute that you can point at and say, Terence Crawford is the best fighter I've ever seen do that. But Errol Spence, on the other hand, I think you can look at his jab and say, yeah, I don't think I've seen a better jab out of a fighter before. I don't think I've seen anybody work their jab and work their pacing and their movement exactly the way that they should be working it. You know, he does that jab movement very, very well. And he's probably the best in the business at using that jab and working off of that jab. Now, Is that going to win him the fight? I would think so. I think jabs control fights. I think movement controls fights. I think pacing controls fights. And he who controls the pace of a fight usually wins that fight. It's definitely going to be on Terence Crawford to change the pace of the fight, to pull a new rabbit out of his hat, to show Errol Spence Jr. a trick that he's never seen before, to throw his game plan off. Now, who is the more complete fighter? If you went off of just jab and footwork and ring and ring generalship, who's able to control the ring, who would you say is the more complete fighter out of these two guys? Me personally, I'm going with Errol Spence Jr. I think he is the total package. The only thing I do not like about Errol Spence Jr., I would have to say, is his lack of speed. And you know, that's a complete it's a complete flip on his whole game plan, though. If you put speed on the Errol Spence Jr., he's not the same fighter anymore. He doesn't have that control of pace anymore. So I mean, even though I would like to see him move with a little more urgency and be a little more speedy, I think that would hurt his overall fighting style or game plan that he uses to win fights. So I don't think it works for him to add speed. I think he needs to stay and continue to do exactly what he's been doing, only refine it with more power, with more stamina, and with a granite chin, you know, able to take a good punch. Other than that, I would say he's the most complete fighter in the welterweight division at the moment, barring the fact that we haven't seen enough of Boots yet to know what Boots can actually do. What it's, you know, he could very well be the best welterweight out there. We just haven't seen enough, and we haven't seen him against stiff enough competition to really compare him to these two guys yet. Now, very soon we will be able to do that. Once this fight's over with and done, we will be able to say, you know, we will be able to compare Boots to Spence or Crawford, because one of these guys is going to lose and one of them eventually is going to have to face off with Boots. So we will definitely be seeing very soon who not only is the best out of these two guys, but who is the best out of the top five. And I think right now the top five welterweights would be Spence, Crawford, Boots, Virgil, and you could throw Keith Thurman in there as number 5 if you wanted to. Or Manny Pacquiao if you wanted to. But I think that's it for now, man. Hit that like button for me. Share, subscribe. Tell me what y'all think about that down in the comment section below. Hit me up on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. But you're more than likely to get a response on the tube. Holla at me over there if you want a response. Yeah, I'm done rambling for now. It's your boy, Cardinal Bud Crawford, or E.S. Red, if that's what you want to call me, and we are out of here.
Jumping every day and ain't gonna never take a day off.